very, very warm good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining the 10th Pani Pe Charcha Clean Water Talks with Safe Water Network and USAID. Today, we will be talking on financial and operational performance of water ATMs. This talk will be led by Garvita Chawla, who will be presenting the sector story to us. I am Poonam Sevak from Safe Water Network, your host. I am Vice President's Program and Partnership at Safe Water Network. Safe Water Network, a New York-based organization working in India and Ghana, works on 3 pillars of policy, field implementation, networking and alliance for scaling sustainable, safe water solutions across the world. I would like to welcome Mr. Chigozie Okwu from USAID. He is my co-host. He is from the Foreign Service Office of USAID. Chigozie brings with him a very rich experience on diverse segments like air pollution, sustainable landscapes, biodiversity, and WASH. He has a rich experience in working on program designs, survey, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation from Sub-Saharan Africa. He holds a Master's of Science in Natural Resources and Management from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Mr. Chigozie, and over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Poonam. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here with us. As Poonam mentioned, my name is Chigozie Okwu, and I work with USAID's General Development Office, where I manage our environmental portfolio, including WASH activities. I'm super excited to engage in the 10th edition of the Clean Water Talks, where we can have an opportunity to learn from and engage with leaders from the water sector. USAID strongly believes that to tackle water accessibility globally, we need to support innovative solutions to ensure that all communities can have access to water. One example of this is highlighted through our partnership with the Safe Water Network, who have helped expand water access through the development of water ATMs, an innovative idea that allows communities from all backgrounds to have access to clean drinking water. And as a result of that, I'm particularly excited to learn from Garvita, to learn more about the financial and operational performances of water ATMs in the region. Thank you so much, Poonam. Over to you.
Thank you, Chigozie. Garvita, I am sure, does not need any introduction. She's been working in the water sector for over a decade, and she's working with Safe Water Network in developing scalable models. Her work is primarily focused on business analytics, designing financial tools that support financial and operational safe water enterprises. And today, Garvita will be talking about, do water ATMs in India at an affordable price point make a case for microcredit? She'll be diving deep into models that can be funded, models under which water ATMs are currently operating. How can subsidies be directed for public health improvement? Garvita is a chartered accountant by qualification and holds a Bachelor's of Commerce from Delhi University. Over to you, Garvita.
Thank you, Poonam ma'am, for that very kind introduction. A very warm and welcome to all the participants who are joining us today for Pani Pe Charcha. It is a topic that has eluded most of us sector players, finding the holy grail or the financial sustainability of safe water enterprises. And it is at the crux of my work, which I first started when I joined Safe Water Network, and we have furthered under this collaboration with USAID, with all other sector partners who are also a part of our Clean Water Talks. I'd also like to thank all the sector partners for transparently sharing their financials and operating models for us to be able to draw the lessons that we present today, which form the very basis for drawing the analysis and coming to the conclusions for the lessons that we learned over this journey for a decade for Safe Water Network and much longer for many other sector players in India and across the world. So much thanks to all the partners for sharing their views. We'll start the presentation, but before we deep dive into the models and all that Poonam ma'am described today, we'll share small bites of our previous session where we asked all the sector partners to share their views on what financial viability means to them, how will their enterprises be sustainable, and what do they need for higher private sector engagement and from the public sector, make these enterprises viable and make an impact at scale.
Going forward, the financial viability metrics, we've discussed that previously, but there are several angles, several levels at which costs are being incurred. In our particular case, all the costs have been self-funded. The water revenue is never enough to meet those costs and even provide for the capex. So the need for VGF is distinct. It will only help reach out to more and more people and also provide sustainable jobs, which is something that we've always believed that SWEs are in a very good position to do, and we as Janajal have always focused and wanted to do that. So there are costs which are, like I said, they're constantly growing upon us, and those have to be provided for. So again, the short of the long is that VGF is critical and will be extremely supportive for running operations.
Longer the concession term, it actually benefits all stakeholders concerned. The government, the community, as well as the private partner who is working on this one. So a minimum term of 10 years to a maximum of 20 years.
This L1 tendering for L1, only selecting the L1 partner is something, there's something wrong in that process, because L1 can be, anyone can be L1, and then the quality of the work suffers. So there's a huge compromises on the L1 bidder. So the government should have chosen someone from, considering the technical parts and everything, they should go for nomination based procurement, or maybe L2 can be considered, something like that.
There do turn out to be a lot of plants which are unsustainable for whatever various reasons. To be some built-in clause to be able to take decisions on what to do with those, and what support will the government give to either shift them, or because the fact is that today we have too many plants which are underutilized. So the fact is that it's not serving anyone.
And overall, through our experience, we feel that for this model to be successful, especially in rural areas, the capex has to be subsidized and part of opex has to be subsidized. And for urban areas, substantial part of the capex has to be subsidized, and the opex can be self-generating.
Yeah, I think because we are discussing private sector engagement in SWEs, I think government has experimented with lot other models than EPC and BOOT and BOT, but the same has not been done for water sector. So for example, hybrid annuity model has been widely adopted for the roads and the infrastructure segment and other parts as well. However, much of the public investment goes into water, and there is very low private sector investment. So I think first recommendation would be that there should be more models tried in where government becomes a sector partner which is contributing in terms of say 40% or 60% of the cost, whatever be the mix, and also helps the private sector by giving a desired annuity return, which results in a fair risk sharing between the public and the private sector partners, which can actually encourage more private sector participation into it. Second, and building on all the other sector partners who've talked about, L1 tendering and taking care of the O&M provisions, I think it is also important to define life cycle costs, because right now in water sector, we don't look at the life cycle cost. Even if there is O&M, there will be major replacements of these units at the end of 5 years, 10 years. There will be membrane replacements, there will be motor replacements. So those also need to be taken account for, whether by building a revolving fund or by keeping provisions within the tender document. But there have to be provisions to ensure that there is greater transparency on those cost elements. As we heard all the sector partners and their ask, we'll come to the key recommendations that we derive through this lesson as well. But if I summarize them, we hear partners talking about need for a viability gap funding for the part of OPEX and a need for funding the CAPEX upfront. There is a need to ensure that the unviable units are relocated. There is a need to ensure that other than the L1 or the lowest cost bidder mechanism has to be selected. So those are some of the key takeaways that we have from all the partners, and we'll hear more. But let's first dive into the presentation. These are some of the sector stats that you see on the screen. I think the problem of unavailability of safe, affordable, reliable drinking water to a large section of the population, which is missing today in India. About 600 million people face extreme water stress, as stated by NITI Aayog. And SWEs help bridge that gap. How does the sector look like? It is a fragmented sector. There would be about 50,000 SWs across the country, with about 10,500 being among the SW implementers like ourselves, and majority being a public sector investment, which has gone in through tendering processes at the state level, at the railways level, among others. What you see on your screen are some of the select partners, some of the SW implementers. It's a non-exhaustive list, but there are many others who come in as contractors, who put in the equipment, and then its longevity, its sustainability is not ensured. These are some of the key operating models, and these are the traditional models which have been used. We are all familiar with the different models, which starts with, the minimum risk for the contractor, like an EPC and engineering, procurement and construction model, wherein the investment will be done by the public sector. There will be a separate awarding authority which will do the user fee collection, and it is comparatively easier to implement. It is like any other infrastructure project. Its major pitfall is that there is low tender pricing, like all the sector partners talked about, who have also participated in it. BOT, user fee, or build, operate, transfer user fee and annuity are similar, with just one distinction. One has collection of user fee with the private authority and the other has it with the concessionaire. Most of these are funded from the financial institutions. However, unless the interest elements, the cost escalations, the O&M provisions are built in, they become unviable projects put under the fit and forget model. Like we discussed, HAM is something that has not been tried in water sector at large right now, especially not in SWEs, but it's a model which has been implemented very well in the roads and infrastructure sector, and something that deserves a pilot in the water space, I would say, where the government brings in the 40% and the balance 60% comes in through deferred payments with the awarding authority. The social entrepreneur model is something that most of the sector partners present here today is what we follow, wherein there is 100% community buy-in, which brings in the land, which brings in its commitment to buy water at an affordable price. There is a social entrepreneur who's willing to manage the enterprise, and there is a philanthropic entity or a public sector entity which is willing to fund the initial capex. This ensures affordable pricing of the water. There is high community buy-in. It becomes scalable and replicable. However, there is a need for continued VGF. Why the VGF? We will learn through the slides that follow. As we developed this particular report and analysis that we present today, there are few key hypotheses that we explored. One, that there has to be a synergy between the private and the public sector to ensure that these enterprises thrive. Two, they are only partially financially sustainable at an affordable pricing. If one is willing to look at a higher price, they become sustainable on their own. But that takes away the affordability matrix, which is at the core of what we do today. The sector itself is fragmented and there is a need to improve the efficiency. So these were some of the key hypotheses that we explored. And the key areas of inquiry included, what are the current models? What are the new models that can be piloted? What are the cost levers which are needed for sustainability of the enterprises? What is the viability gap funding requirement, if there is any? Because some partners, as we would learn more, under their model, there is a need which gets covered through, again, the initial grant mechanism. And what is the potential for sustainability and scalability? This is how a typical CAPEX or capital expenditure and operational expenditure for an SWE looks like. What you see on the left is a range that we've developed depending upon what is the initial upfront investment that is put in as CAPEX. you can see that it ranges anywhere between $5,000 to $30,000. An immediate question would be, why such a varied range? So a typical equipment or a water treatment equipment would cost anywhere between say 4 lakhs to 7 lakhs or about $2,000 to $5,000. However, why, $10,000. Why does it vary? It will be a function of technology. It will be a function of innovations that are rolled out with it, like water ATMs. Are they installed with it? Is there a mechanism put in for reject water? Is the construction done, or was it contributed by the community? So there are a lot of elements to it which make it difficult to give one specific number for the capital investment. Similarly, the monthly operational expenditure will vary greatly by the model and the geography. In an urban area, the minimum wages would be much higher. In a rural area, the minimum wages would be lower. Similarly, in an urban area, the cluster management cost may be higher because the SWEs may be far from each other. There would be huge travel expenses and cluster management costs. However, that may not be the case in urban. So the monthly OPEX itself will vary from somewhere between $80 to $300. But just a ballpark number, monthly operational expenses with our experience is usually 50% of the revenue, which is fixed at an affordable price. These are the typical funding models, and we'll dive detailed into the financials as well. A typical funding model which have been piloted, scaled up, are the ones where the CapEx is grant funded. It is either through CSR or through bilateral organizations or through public sector grants. Or they are tenders as EPC BOT like we discussed previously. Their problems include that they are usually on a lowest cost bidder basis, and they have either low or no provisions for O&M. Even if the provisions are built in for O&M, they will usually not have provisions to map the actual functioning of the equipment beyond its installation, which is something which defines various sector players who are present today, that they use remote monitoring to track the equipment over its useful life and not just at the time of installation. The third model would be the impact fund capital funded, which has a low or very or no interest rate, that is at zero interest rate, with longer moratoriums for repayment tenures. Some of the innovative models that we can and we should explore as a sector, this is something that we put forward to the organizations which provide the funding, is output of performance-based viability gap funding model, wherein depending based on the impact and the milestones that are achieved, the viability gap is disbursed to the entity which is managing the enterprise. The hybrid annuity model that we just spoke about, and the pooled bond fund model. The pooled bond fund model basically implies building in a revolving fund which can be used for high value repairs and maintenance, for actually getting the CapManix or the capital maintenance expenditure part, which does not get covered through either grants or through the revenue. This is where I want to spend the next 5 minutes, and I think it is something that distinguishes a lot of sector players and their costings. This is a waterfall chart which shows the average annual revenue. The average annual revenue in our experience, and depending upon the data that we've collected from so many partners, is around $3,500. As one can see, almost 47% of this goes as direct operating expense. 36 plus 11%. This includes the operator salaries, the cost of electricity, the raw water, the chemicals and consumables, which are direct to the water provision. What you see as the next two elements are something that come in as a part of the community model. However, in case of a direct implementer, it would go directly to the implementing agency. The entrepreneur returns, that is 40% of the revenues, is something either that the community retains for its management over longer term, or in a model like Safe Water Network, it goes to the self-help group and to the community at large. It looks 40%, but it comes to a mere 8,000 to 10,000 for a family of 4 for 1 month, which is the basic income that they need even to sustain their households. Only in percentage terms, it looks large enough, but otherwise it is a very small amount for running a family. Asset renewal fund is something that we've built in here, and it's a public sector terminology for the pooled funding to ensure that the capital maintenance expenditure part is met in. Once there is a motor failure or a membrane failure, this is something that the communities voluntarily contribute to a revolving fund, which is kept in a separate account. What you see on right side of the chart are the cluster management costs, which do not get covered by revenue. As you see, these costs are essential costs for water quality, for monitoring and evaluation, for continued consumer activation to ensure that there is a higher penetration, there is utilization of the equipment. We heard one of the partners talk about underutilized units. So unless there is high consumer activation and demand generation for the water in the area, it will remain underutilized. These are the costs that remain uncovered by revenue. In our experience, they come to somewhere close to about $100 per month for every enterprise. And that is something that we fund through philanthropic grants. This is the part of the cost that we propose should be built in viability gap funding models, which can be disbursed, linked to milestones in terms of impact achieved, in terms of consumer penetration achieved, in terms of health and livelihoods, health improved, the livelihoods generated. There can be so many measurable outcomes which they can be mapped to. We also did a comparative analysis of how the various SWA implementers fare versus the public sector installations of same value. As you can see, the capex would be broadly in the same range, somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000, maybe $40,000 in some cases, but where it is $40,000, it builds in the 5-year startup cost as well. The revenue per station again varies a lot. However, the minimum number is seen everywhere as about $100 per month. The distinction is that here only there is a provision for an operator's salary, and there is no remuneration to the community, nor there is a fund to ensure that there is capital, a cluster level service entity, which can actually handle the repairs and maintenance of the enterprise. The pricing is broadly similar. However, in some cases, it is actually lower, from 3 to 7 cents versus a 4 to 14 cents. Also much higher in urban areas than 14 cents in case of private implementers. One of the largest states that we provide technical assistance to even recognize the need for viability gap funding at about $40 per month, while providing free electricity and raw water. However, this is not a blanket VGF approval that is given, but we feel that it is a step in the right direction to recognize that there is a need for viability gap funding to ensure affordability. The donor contributes the capex, whereas in the other case, the government does, and provides a $40 per water purification plant as refurbishment allowance. The operating stations are at 60 to 70%, whereas most of the partners that we have on the call today as part of SW Alliance very proudly report almost 100% operations through RMS. This high failure rate in the public sector has been noticed because of absence of a field services entity, which can cater to the repairs and maintenance, which has put in the remote monitoring in place for early checks. The results-based framework that we came up with on the basis of all that we've talked about today, that we can divide it into 4 broad models. The social enterprise model, wherein the capex is contributed by the philanthropic partner. There is affordability, there is sustainability through a revolving fund. However, its weaknesses being that it needs that VGF on a long-term basis. The micro enterprise model, where community becomes the complete owner, where the implementer hands it over to the community. And we have a few alliance partners who run their enterprises on that model. I think their challenge again becomes presence of a field services entity which can do the repairs and maintenance. However, its key success criteria is that it creates social entrepreneurship and 100% ownership of the enterprise. The microcredit model, again, we have Drinkwell here who has also ventured and implemented it, where there is a bank loan involved. The problem is there are no bankable models. The community size becomes a challenge, which is one of the key weaknesses. Its success measure is that there can be high return on capital if there is high offtake. If there are about 500 cans being sold, then it is a model which can be replicated. However, not at the price point of 7 cents per 20 liters. It will have to be at a price point of 14 cents per 20 liters. So that is something that has stopped the scale up of the microcredit model, where the repayment cannot come as part of revenues if we want to ensure affordability. Lastly, the impact of the social funding model, which has been piloted by a lot of development funders through impact bonds. It's measurable outcomes for milestone funding is the key success measure. However, that, like I said, there is need for more pilots. There is a need for that capital to come in with measurable outcomes, which can actually disburse not just the initial capital, but also the viability gap funding on a long-term basis for sustainability. So what do we take away from our session today? Our key recommendations are that, one, we recognize that water cannot be priced fully. Municipal corporations, water utilities across the world in the biggest cities of the world, they need long-term subsidy to ensure that water, which is a human right, it is provided at an affordable price point. Why should SWEs be different if they can actually prove sustainability at that price point? Two, there is a need to have more result framework-based subsidy programs to ensure that these enterprises are able to sustain beyond the initial capex, beyond the startup period. There is a need to build in life cycle costs, particularly at the public sector tendering level, because that is where there is an absence of building the life cycle cost, the O&M provision, the capital maintenance expenditure, to ensure that there is not fit and forget model, there is 100% utilization of the capital for where it is put. And to incentivize private sector participation, which is there in a big way in the large infra, but has not found its way into the small water enterprise space. And lastly, promote digital innovations, which can actually relocate the government investments to include sustainability initiatives. That's it from my end. Thank you. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that we have.
Thank you very much, Garvita, for this very nice presentation. And at the same time, I would like to thank all the partners who contributed through sharing their operations, models, finances, coming out with the recommendations which they felt were required for the sector. So we all agree that the sector is making great leaps in providing safe drinking water, especially to the urban poor and to the people in the rural who are beyond the pipe. It has proven its resilience. It is very important in the climate change times that we are living. So as I wait for questions to be entering the chat box, the few questions which remain unanswered and which are to be worked upon together as a group from our last 3 workshops, what can be done? And you have already explained, but when you say that we need results-based subsidy models where we are going to define KPIs, who is going to monitor, what are the third-party audit systems, what would be required, Garvita, to make it happen? Because we know, especially in our country and across the world, water is also being considered as a fundamental right. So in this scenario, what happens to these private models? And how do we get the result-based VGF?
Yeah, very, very important to answer that, I think. In our country only, we had, there was a idea floated about having a social stock exchange, which talked about a lot of these models and how they can be implemented with a results-based framework. Or we can call them with a lot of names. It can be performance-based subsidies. It can be output-based viability gap funding model. But the crux remains the same. There has to be an entity which is providing the initial capex as an upfront investment, which comes through a philanthropic grant or as an impact capital at low or no interest cost. There has to be a third party, somebody who is doing the outcome evaluation, which is typically an outcome evaluation agency. It could be public or a private sector, but it has to be independent in its nature to evaluate those outcomes, on the basis of which the viability gap funding gets disbursed to an escrow account, which can be managed only by the implementer. So there is a need to map the outcomes and say that these are the outcomes that were needed. Against these outcomes, this is the achievement which warrants the disbursement of this much viability gap, which should automatically get disbursed to an escrow account, which can be managed whether at the implementer level or at the community level will depend upon the training and capacity building at the community level. We've seen communities come a long way in managing their own enterprises. So can the communities come to that level of managing their own VGF, which gets disbursed to them like a direct benefit transfer? We've seen government implement the direct benefit scheme for gas connections. So huge network that's connected. So I think it is a model that is worth a pilot, wherein there are independent agencies involved for evaluation of outcomes and for disbursement of the gap funding, after looking at the cost transparently, of course. So we've seen a lot of sector partners who have shared their cost transparently with us. There is a lot of that data that rests within the sector, which we can bring forward through the report that we are going to soon publish as to why the case for the subsidy and how to disperse it.
In your analysis, we heard you speak about trying to normalize the data and bring in the concept of averages. So what is the average OPEX per month and what is the average subsidy requirement per month?
Yeah. So like I said, typically at a price point of 7 cents for 20 liters, the average revenue comes to about $3,500 a month. 50% of that goes as direct operating cost. So $1,750 annually goes as direct operating cost. The balance is something that goes towards the community return and the asset maintenance. What is not covered by the revenue is about $100 per month, which is needed as a gap funding to cover the costs of field support, supervision, and field audits and consumer activation. The 5 elements of cost which do not get covered by revenue, they cannot realistically get covered by revenue. If you look at any water utilities financial statement across the world, they would not map these costs to revenues. It is not something that you recover from a consumer because it is not a direct cost of getting the water to the consumer. However, it is an essential part to ensure sustainability at the cluster level. And that is why we call them as cluster management costs.
So having heard this, the next question is, do safe water enterprises make a case for microcredit? Can they ever be considered as a microcredit model? Social impact we can still understand while you were speaking, but I am so sure that microcredit is a place which is a very important area if we want to scale. And how do we go about tapping a model in this place?
Yeah. So microcredit, as we all know, has done a lot of wonders in the sanitation world. Why it has not taken off in the water sector is a question that we ask ourselves. The answer remains the same. At the prevailing interest rate, we've tried to pilot it with one of the biggest rural banks in the country, NABARD, wherein we've tried to get the interest element built in for just the capex part of the project, not even building in the entrepreneur level contributions or the startup cost, just the water treatment equipment cost. However, if you want to ensure affordability at a price of 7 cents for 20 liters, it does not make a case for recovering the interest as well as the capital. That is why we talk about impact capital, we talk about social development bonds, where it is only the return of the capital that we are talking about. However, again, I would say it is possible on a portfolio basis, but not on a standalone basis. At a portfolio approach, if you have locations which can sell 500 cans a day and make thrice the revenue that we are discussing today. So we are talking about revenues at least as high as $12,000 annually. Then they will make the case. However, let's look at how our portfolio looks like. At least 50% of the enterprises would be only at the sustainability mark. They will not be selling 500 cans a day. The footfalls are not that high. So to ensure that utilization, that is why there is a need for building in the viability gap to ensure higher utilization of the equipment. Like Aarti of Water Life spoke about, there is a need to relocate the ones which are not viable so that there are provisions built in that the precious capital does not go to waste. So long answer short, microcredit is not something that is viable at an affordable pricing. It is viable for very limited enterprises with high footfall areas and assured revenues.
Okay, there is a question from Mr. Kurt Soderland, our CEO, and this is for the group, and I am sure USAID, anybody interested can express their interest. Is there an interest of SWE Alliance partners to roadshow the funding needs as a group, approach the government agencies, development agencies and foundations to make a case for new funding models to ensure sustainability and impact. So if we can have a quick vote to understand from all the participants and the leaders, how do you take to this concept?
The concept of a roadshow does sound very interesting. There are obviously different models, like Garvita mentioned. There are different models out there today, which is working, across various sectors. But if I were to look at it, there are actually two distinct type of SWEs. The urban model, which is basically probably to a large extent sustainable, bringing in those sort of revenues about $10,000 to $12,000 a year. And then you go to the rural models, which require a VGF for them to actually function. So if there is a way that we can actually separate the two and ensure that, at the end of the day, you want to increase coverage, and you want to increase coverage with an element of sustainability. We can have a roadshow which is specifically aimed at areas where today a lot of the SWE partners are, not very keen on going, right? Because you don't want to put good money after bad and ensure that you're actually going down the revenue trajectory. And it's important that some of these portfolio units are the ones that are actually put into the roadshow for various funding models. We did talk about the type of bond, the bonds, the social impact bonds could definitely be a good way to go ahead, because then you can not only attract revenues, or you not only attract funds from India, but you could also attract these from across the world. And there would be a stamp of approval. If we have somebody like a USAID actually supporting us on these social impact bonds, that would definitely give a huge fillip for us to actually popularize this, not only in India and the US, but also across a lot of European countries, which are looking at doing some impact-based work.
Madhu, thank you for your thoughts. And yes, once we get into this phase, the most important criteria where the government and the SWE implementers are struggling is basically siting of the water ATM and the location, which is so important, because while the SWE implementer is very concerned about getting at least the break-even cost, the government is interested in giving the last mile water, where usually the sustainability is not there. Coming back to Garvita, I would want you to share the story of the government models that you have studied. What is their status and how are they being managed?
So I think first I'll probably comment on what Madhu said. I think it would be great to, yes, do the roadshows, but I think my argument would be why not have a portfolio approach? Something that you also mentioned, that we know that maybe in some areas the urban SWEs are viable, whereas to reach the rural last mile population, we need an affordable price point, and we need higher VGF also, because the cluster management costs are high, because the footfalls are low. So maybe a portfolio based approach to cross subsidize between the two models. And there are a lot of implementers who are today on the call as well, who have both rural and urban footprint. So I think it makes the right case for getting that funding for working on a portfolio approach. For the government models, like I talked about in my presentation also, we've been technical assistance providers to one of the largest states, which has set up close to 18,000 such small water enterprises, and has experienced failure rates of as high as 40 to 60%. What is the reason for the failure rates? Many that we all talked about. They are awarded on L1 basis. The tenders did not have O&M provisions beyond, say, the first 3 years. Even if they had the provisions, they were limited to only providing for some specific repairs maintenance. They do not cover large value capital replacement, say membrane replacement, or if the operator does not have the inclination, or if his salaries have not been disbursed in those areas because the utilization of the equipment itself was so low that the revenues were low enough not to pay operator salary, and then the operator loses interest in managing the enterprise. So there are water quality issues. The water quality testing has not been built in, say, as a part of the tender document. So there are a lot of reasons for the failure of those enterprises. However, because there is precious capital that has been invested in it, which can still be revived. Like I said, the state government in this case took the right step in the right direction by taking a decision to revive those units, by acknowledging that there is a need for viability gap funding and making sure that that funding reaches the last mile to ensure that the equipment is up and running. Also for installation of remote monitoring equipment at the sites to ensure that the functioning is being monitored and a contractor or an implementer is being paid on the basis of data which is being collected by that remote monitoring system, that there is functioning of that system, and then you get paid. So there is greater accountability, there is greater transparency that can be built in to improve the public sector investment and get more value for the money that has been invested.
Thank you very much, Garvita. With us, we have the CEO of Development Alternatives, ma'am, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi. Ma'am, we would like to hear from you if you are open to sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, and I'm listening carefully. Why? Because I have an interest in this subject, but not much. We initially in rural areas, we tried these social enterprise models, not in a business, try to do a business model. Our initial experience long back was the same, that it requires gap funding, but we haven't gone about doing this in a very systematic approach. But a lot of these experiments that you are sharing today have a lot of learnings. And one of the things always puzzles me is about the water resource as such. We are trying to chase something. A water resource is something which is getting contaminated day by day. In any of these models, I'm not seen, since we are investing in infrastructure, community engagement, and also capturing the rain as a fresh water and using that water for, and also reducing the technology investments. Is that a possibility? Also can be explored. So freshwater.
Dr. Vijay Lakshmi, we will invite you to the 11th Pani Pe Charcha, which is coming up in the month of November. And there we will be talking about source sustainability, and we seek your active participation and we very much welcome. And
it helps us in different ways.
Yeah. And all our safe water enterprise implementers were working very closely with the government on the Catch the Rain program, where we established Jal Shakti Kendras and we did rainwater harvesting at our water ATM site, at the schools or a government institutional building, which was there in the last 100 days. So that's a very important feature. We definitely agree. And now I will invite Kurt and USAID to speak a few words. So first with Kurt, and then I will hand it over to Mr. Chigoze.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Two things. One is I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this material and presentation. Garvita, certainly yourself, who did a terrific job of compiling and organizing, and of course to the entire group that really made immense contributions to ensure that we really understand the whole landscape around financial sustainability and the challenges across a whole mix of participants and in different markets. So it's really terrific to get to this point. I'd ask that question by chat, which Poonam you put forward, really to see how do we take this case, first of all, bring more focus to it, but then take the case forward to additional development agencies and government agencies, of course, where there are models for subsidies, because ultimately at the end of the day, we're all struggling to find ways to ensure sustainability and scale and replication. We know it's not going to come just from philanthropic dollars alone. And I think the big question looms over us is how do we collaborate, work together as an alliance to be more effective at making a strong, compelling case for the big scale dollars that are going to address the challenges that we face. So again, thank you all very much. It's been terrific to see focus. This topic is near and dear to, I think, many of us, all of us, certainly myself, the case for financial sustainability, because if not that, we can't achieve our social impact goals as well. And the second thing, very quickly, I don't think we meet again until post-Diwali, so I just wanted to wish everyone a happy holiday season and festivities. So we'll see you on the backside of that, I guess, in a couple, 2-3 weeks or so. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Kurt. definitely the sector is working together to make a case for directing subsidies and how to grant those subsidies. And now I will ask Mr. Chigose to share his views, and with that we will end the session today. Over to you, Mr. Chigose.
Yeah, thank you so much, Poonam, and thank you for sharing your ideas. I think this has been a really interesting discussion focusing on different models and ways to scale up innovative approaches to address water accessibility. And I know that at USAID, one of our core tenets is looking at how do we invest within projects that have a long-term impact and also ensure sustainability to help improve access to clean water for all communities. And so I definitely did enjoy and appreciate this discussion, bringing together various leaders in the water space to share ideas around this and also learn about different models that are available. And I definitely do echo some of the sentiments that were shared within the discussion. Thank you so much, Poonam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chigose. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you all the participants, Garvita, for the excellent presentation. And sincerest thanks to each and every member of the Alliance who so transparently shared their financial performances and the various operating models to help us arrive to the presentation which we made. We will be developing this study into a financial and operating report and sharing it with USAID to begin with and across with other partners to see how we can make a case for directing subsidies. So thank you very much. Have a great evening.